Oh my goodness. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unleashed with me, Scarlett Johnson. And I'm going live right now, and then I will play the interview that I did today with mom extraordinary Colby Decker. She was great. She's a detective, frankly. She's done such a great job doing a deep dive into Wisconsin Department of Education, and it's relevant for parents across the country what she's found, because what's happening in Wisconsin is happening everywhere. It doesn't matter where you live, red state, blue state, red county, blue county. There are school districts that are determined to advance this equity agenda despite the will and wishes of citizens, constituents, parents. They persist. They do persist. They want to do all the things, as Becky Pringle likes to say. Before I talked about the interview, I wanted to go through some of the very big breaking stories that we have put out in Moms for Liberty, that I put out on my own social media. And a lot of it is revolves around our old friends, SPLC. SPLC is an organization that you just say Southern Poverty Law Center, and it just like, for me, because they personally attacked me, they went after Moms for Liberty in just this vicious, immoral way. And their immorality only becomes more apparent after this indictment by the Department of Justice. 11 counts of fraud. Basically, as we all have come to know, that the SPLC, where they couldn't find instances of actual racism, so they created it, they manufactured it, they funded groups like the KKK, Aryan Nation, actual white supremacist groups. They funded them. They funneled money. Donors didn't know that. Donors thought they were fighting all of the hate. Instead, they were funneling money into the hate. And they used groups like Moms for Liberty. They used us. They put us on a hate map. In 2023, they said we were domestic terrorists. And those words had consequences and implications. To this day, mainstream outlets, when they say Moms for Liberty, they will say the notation designated by SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, as a radical white supremacist group. It's insane. It's not true. And they did this for many reasons. First of all, they smear who they fear, and we were successful, and we continue to be successful in operating at the local level and in empowering parents to fight for their parental rights, to fight for their children. And they can't have that. They don't want that. They don't want to see parents being successful in the fight for their children. The control over the institutions of education, they want that power. They want that control. That's what it's all about. So let's get to something unique that I think a lot of normal, regular people going about their day don't understand about SPLC and a lot of other of these activist organizations, is that they develop curriculum. So the same SPLC that has been smearing parents, calling moms, regular moms, just moms that, like me before 2020, were just driving their minivan. I had 5 kids. I voted and I listened to talk radio at times, but I wasn't overtly political. I didn't even know how many members were on our school board. I'd never attended a school board meeting. I'd spoken at one, certainly wasn't actively involved in local politics. But what they did to my children, that changed everything. And that was true for many parents during this parent revolution, where our eyes were opened. And once they were opened, we couldn't go back. We couldn't unsee all of the damage, all of the things that we were seeing. And suddenly a lot of things started to make sense. Things that we had thought about and things that we were seeing with our kids in classrooms that we dismissed and just filed away. Well, that all came back as we started to learn more about curriculum and the way things operated and the level of politics that were being engaged in, especially far left politics in our schools, was shocking to me and to many, many parents. So the SPLC, this organization that smeared moms that said, "Hey, I am coming before you, school board, asking you to please open up schools for our children. It is safe to open schools, and then to remove masks from our children because they're not doing anything, particularly kids, young kids that need to look at faces, to learn how to read. They need to be in the classrooms, all of those things that we fought for. Well, we were labeled as extremists, white supremacists, all of these terrible things um, by the SPLC. Turns out they have an education arm called Learning for Justice or Teaching Tolerance. The materials have appeared in school resource pipelines across the country, including those in my own home state, Wisconsin. This is something that I've been keenly aware of for a while, but I didn't really understand the depths of their entanglement and their entrenchment into all aspects of curriculum, including mental health and social emotional learning. The Defending Ed has just released a fantastic report about just how insidious this all is, and encompassing 42 states on record as of right now. I did my own research and investigative work. I put that on X yesterday morning. It's we've got almost 200,000 views. Moms for Liberty has reposted and shared what is going on in Wisconsin. Same thing, Rosalind Hanson from Maryland, from Montgomery County, Maryland. We've posted excerpts of her talking to her school board about SPLC and that curriculum in her district. She's recently had a conversation with CEO and co-founder of Moms for Liberty, Tina Deskovich, on the Fire of Liberty. We just aired that yesterday, so you could watch that great interview where Rosalind goes into depth to talk about Montgomery County and the SPLC. So this curriculum is in our schools. It's K through 12 schools. Parents don't know this. There is so little transparency on this issue. Parents deserve transparency. They deserve access to this curriculum and the full paper trail. Fortunately, we can offer some of that. If you look on our social media, there are numerous links. So the receipts are there. I posted a very long thread. The same curriculum that you see in Wisconsin, it's the curriculum that would be in your state. So I advise you that if you are interested in this, please go to Defending Ed, read the report, and look at the social media of Moms for Liberty. We have been putting out a lot of great material about this. And all the links are there, all the receipts. So just click on it and you're going to see, even if it's unique to Wisconsin, with my research, it's not too hard to take some of that language, look at those links, and apply it to your own home state. And you just go to your state Department of Education, go to the board docs section on your school district, just go to your school district website, and you're going to see some links to board docs, and then just start to do some searches there. I've had people that that go to Grok, they go to ChatGPT, they start taking some of the PDFs and some of the terminology, they plug it in and they start to see the results they get. So I suggest that you do that. So, Learning for Justice curriculum pipeline has been showing up all across America in civics, social emotional learning, like I said, in math. Yes, in math, they are incorporating ideas of anti racism and putting those into math, creating math problems that use all of this language, and they teach kids to be anti racist. And if you've been paying attention over the last years, you know that that means critical race theory. Anti-racism is actual racism, teaching kids to be racist, to brainwash them, to create, again, SPLC is very good at that, to create the very thing that they are fighting to oppose. They create it. They create the problem. They create the anxiety in the kids and then say, oh, we've got to come here and solve the mental health crisis. Well, it's one that they've created. So they haven't just smeared parents, they are shaping classrooms. They are shaping the hearts and minds of our children. 5-year-olds should not be sitting in circles asked to process discrimination, bias, taking action, oppressive behaviors, all through a curriculum whose pipeline is connected to the Southern Poverty Law Center. And here, so Learning for Justice. So this is a K through third grade curriculum. And just to show one example right here, exactly, they tell kids K through second grade through third grade, sit in a circle and think of times where they witnessed discrimination. Ask students to think about this and whether they took action to address discrimination. Ask them to share their story with a partner. Consider it the following: why did you feel uncomfortable speaking up? Or why did you feel comfortable speaking up? Again, they're getting kids to sit in their discomfort. This is a struggle session. They are putting little kids through a woke, anti racist struggle session. This is not nice. This is not kind. And this is not how you engender a feeling of belonging. This is how you other. This is how you create differences. This is how you teach kids to see race. And there isn't a 5-year-old that is, Mommy, can I learn more about oppressive behaviors? No, that's not something that they're going to naturally say. It's going to be but through the use of propaganda, they are going to be indoctrinated into using those terms and taught what they mean, and they imprinted. They are trying to imprint on our kids. So this Learning for Justice guide moves quickly into discrimination, bias, taking action, speaking up, role playing, and interrupting so-called oppressive behaviors. This language sounds normal to a DEI activist, but it's not normal for everyone else. It's not normal for 5-year-olds. This is an activist framework being introduced through childhood social development, and lots of times under the guise of mental health. So if you are a legislator and you're listening to this, or if you're a parent listening to this, please inform your state legislators, and your school board members, your superintendents about this language. It can feel good to say we want to fund mental health programs. We want to help kids, of course. But this funding, this mental health sort of pie of funding billions of dollars, is just rife with fraud, it's abuse, and groups like SPLC are creating curriculum so that they can get a cut. They want a cut of those billions. They want a cut of that federal funding. They want a piece of that pie, that pork pie offered by the federal government. And they'll do anything to get it. And they will water down what is meant for adults, and I think inappropriate even for older kids. And they're going to spoon feed it to younger children. And what better way to capture their hearts and minds than to indoctrinate them early? So the biggest point from Defending Education's tracker is that this isn't just one rogue lesson or one teacher. This is not a random worksheet or a random lesson. SPLC's Learning for Justice or Teaching Tolerance materials, they are vast, um, they are embedded, and they are considered a gold standard. Believe it or not, SPLC in circles of education is considered a gold standard. They're on the resource page of just about every state department of education. And after, especially after the recent indictments, it's time to remove SPLC from K through 12 education. SPLC should not be receiving federal tax dollars. Absolutely not. And if their materials are being used and promoted and pimped out, they're going to get a profit. They're going to use and abuse tax dollars. So we need to expose this. We need everyone to expose this, and we need to finally disrupt the SPLC. Remember, it will show up on district web pages in teacher trainings, classroom lessons, district-wide curriculum, SEL, social emotional learning, social justice standards, anti-racism, equity policies, belonging, anti-discrimination policies, and other education resources. So you have to do your research. The SPLC's classroom pipeline is much bigger than people understand, and it's time that we all do the work, and really get more of our leaders and school board members to understand it. They don't walk into a classroom with a sign that says, "Hey, let's politically indoctrinate your kids." They're getting pretty close. They're getting closer and closer every year. They come through back doors, and mental health and social emotional learning is now, I think, the primary way that they are able to incorporate their training, their teaching for tolerance. And really the true scope is hard to capture because we can't often see the full curriculum, all of the lessons, all of the online textbooks or resources, PDFs, or the teacher selected daily material that they're just going to use in the classroom, things that they'll say to the kids, all predicated on SPLC and what they have been funneling through teachers unions and through prior to the Trump administration, through the federal government and through state departments of education like mine in Wisconsin. So we need to be ever vigilant. Your school district is not immune. Your state is not immune. Wisconsin is certainly not immune. And the Southern Poverty Law Center is not going to be easy to dismantle, but it is something that we absolutely have to do, considering that they have just been proven to be utter and complete frauds. So there's a few other, let me see if I have a few other things to show. You can see here, Wisconsin state standards, literacy in all subjects, several references to SPLC and their curriculum and their website are made in this. So this is where the standards. Now, this is really important because the state standards, school districts will do all of their work over the summer in planning for the school year and adapting their policies and their guidance all through Wisconsin state standards. So if SPLC is recommended this way, then there's a very good chance that a lot of school districts are going to utilize their curriculum or at least the language, whether they know it or not. And quickly, I want to briefly touch on a subject that I just posted about today, but we're going to have a lot more conversations about this because it's a very big deal and something very exclusive breaking story from myself and Moms for Liberty. And this is about this little pizza pie chart right here. And I don't know if you can't see what it says, you're lucky, but it's very shocking. And I'm going to go through a little bit of the story, how we got here. So a 7th grade parent discovered this right here. You can see it's kind of all crumpled up. They discovered this in their child's backpack. And they looked at it and they read it and they were shocked and horrified and asked their child, "Where did you get this?" It turns out that there was a special school presentation in which an outside organization was brought in to the school district. This is the Crandon School District in rural Wisconsin, a town of about 1,700. 1,700. Okay, small rural town. Outside group comes in and talks to students. And here's what, if you can't see that, I'll put up the better image. Here's what it's about consent. And I'm reading, what does pizza have to do with consent? Consent is a collaborative practice that requires listening, checking in, communicating desires, and respecting boundaries. This activity demonstrates that we all have different preferences when it comes to eating pizza. The same with sex. If we are going to engage in sexual activities with someone, it's important to check in with them. What are their wants, their needs, and their boundaries? We want to make sure that we are compatible and on the same page. Middle school. 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, maybe 14-year-olds. Did parents know this was happening? No, they did not. Parents did not have the opportunity to opt out of this presentation. Kids were presented this, had no idea what they were walking into, and parents didn't either. This is a violation of the Supreme Court, which said that when it comes to human growth and development and talking about sex ed, and this is Wisconsin statute, Wisconsin law, the parents have the right to know when these sensitive topics are being discussed so that they can have the ability to opt their children out. Human growth and development curriculum is actually in Wisconsin and many states, usually it's a very there are a lot of statutes and a lot of regulation. Yet school districts, they don't care. So we're going to just kind of dive into this just a little bit, but there's so much more that we're going to talk about separately. So just stay tuned. By next week, you're going to hear a lot more about this. So on one side, here's a question you can see in the green side. Do you want to share pizza? That's the question. On the other side, do you want to have sex? So they're taking something like pizza and all that, and then they're kind of normalizing all of this for the kids and using it as a way to talk about these very sensitive topics. So here's some of the practicing consent. And if you could see, there's this sheet before it's filled in. The kids are given a separate sheet where they can write in their own answers. So what are you into? Well, the kids can write in their answers. Any STDs? Have you been tested recently? 12, 13-year-old kids. What barrier protection methods do you like to use? Again, 12 and 13-year-old kids. Oh, how about this? It turns me on when ... How about this? Kiss, lick, bite, grab my ... Kiss, lick, bite, grab my ... That is a question that someone who is not a parent is asking kids and asking them to give a response to this, all without parental knowledge or consent. So, absolutely abhorrent and shocking. So let's go here. So, how did this happen? That's a question. How did this happen? Well, you're going to see right here. Part of a mental health grant. Project Aware. So, the school district operating through CISA, which is an organization that helps to do the underwriting for grants. LEAs are involved. They work really hard to get a piece of the federal pie. They want to get some money for their school district, and they need to use it for mental health. And this is how they used it. This is the kind of materials and presentations that are funded using those dollars. That should really that should really shock parents. The group, we're going to talk more. I don't want to give too much away, but we're going to talk more about the organization that provided this presentation. And when you see who the presenter was, you will not be shocked. You will not be shocked. But so that's just a little kind of intro into something that we're going to do some deeper dives in and how this all ties into mental health. May is Mental Health Month, and unfortunately, mental health is an issue that's being weaponized and used by political activists in order to have access to kids. I also think a huge financial component. You just can't get around it. Groups like SECUS, Planned Parenthood, SPLC, Advocates for Youth, all of those names that we know so well, they are all very much involved in this. Project Aware, the funding for this particular grant for the Crandon School District, I found the grant number, I've posted that. So they will receive funding. They started in 2023, and that funding continues to 2028. A 5-year project grant funded by the federal government and distributed by the Wisconsin Department of Education. So funded by the federal government, distributed to states, states distribute the money to school districts who apply for the grant. This is the pipeline. And this is how, so this sheet, this right here, that was paid for by you. You paid for this. You paid for it. And that's something we have to come to grips with, and we have to find a way to stop. I know, so difficult. You take one step forward, you try to block this stuff, then these activist far left groups and Democrats, they take the Trump administration to court, they demand reinstatement, and they claim that this is for the mental health of kids. Yeah, you're asking kids these questions, you're asking kids for their mental health. What do they would they tell their partner to kiss, lick, and bite ... That's for their mental health? That to me looks more like grooming. Setting kids up, sexualizing kids, introducing concepts to children that may not have heard those concepts in their home. Maybe and they'll say, oh, the kids have access to the phone. Well, maybe there are increasingly a lot of parents that don't let their 7th graders have phones. They don't have access to all of those things. and they're doing their very best to keep their child away from those materials. They want to protect their child's innocence for as long as possible. Instead, they send their kids to school where it's shattered. And we paid for it. And an outside group brought it in. And this is the way now. This is the new thing that they're doing. Oh, we did, it wasn't me. Tag, not it, not it. Wasn't me. I didn't do it. You can't blame me. In the Crandon School District, the superintendent apparently very shocked. They did their research. They didn't know. It took me 5 minutes to get started on this. All of 5 minutes to realize, hell no, am I not letting this person into my school. I mean, it's not rocket science. I think I'm pretty smart, but this isn't rocket science here. Look up the name of the group that's coming in. Ask to see the materials. Apparently, these materials were supposed to be modified for 7th graders, but they weren't. Oopsie. Oh, we were going to modify them, but we think your kids need to learn about consent. We've decided. My friend and colleague, Bill Brewer, who I want to acknowledge as he's a Wisconsin ambassador, and he was the first to receive this from a parent. And then he passed it along to me, but not before doing some homework, doing some research. And he went through and he read a lot of the PDFs put out by the Wisconsin Department of Instruction. What he noticed, he said this to me today, there were a lot of words, one booklet, 32 pages of guidance about Project Aware. But one word he did not see mentioned once, parents. They like to talk about consent when it's kids consenting to sexual activity when they're 12 and 13, but they don't like to talk about parental consent. That's when consent is like, no, hard pass. Asking parents if they consent to their children being exposed to this sexual activity. No, they don't take the time to do that. Let's guess why. Wonder why. Because they know that most parents would freak out and say no. They don't ask permission. They ask forgiveness. Don't give it to them. This is a violation of Wisconsin state statute. It's a violation of the protocol of the Department of Education, President Trump's executive orders. Let's do something about this. Do something. Who knows what this did to a child? Who knows? I mean, does a week pass where we don't hear about some groomer teacher or someone in a school district in Wisconsin that has access to our kids? They see something like this and they're thinking, a lot easier for me. Thanks for serving up those kids on a platter. This is grooming kids. The definition of it, right here, you're looking at it, and we paid for it. So no, I am not going to let superintendents just say, ooh, golly, I'm just as surprised as you. Why? First of all, so you're either incompetent or you're lying. Either of which of those are not a great thing for our school district. So which is it? You're lying or you're incompetent? Grossly incompetent, as a matter of fact. And two, again, elected members of the legislature of Wisconsin and every state, stop blindly funding departments of education. Stop giving them their wish list. They will tell you it's for mental health. Now you know what mental health looks like for them. Just say no, because they will not tell you the truth. They will show you something, bait and switch. They will tell you something and do something else. They will tell you they're going to modify it for young kids. And then, oopsie, we didn't. And what are you going to do about it? Because they'll send their activist goons to go after you, and they'll send you to school board meetings like just happened in Watertown, and they think that they can scare and intimidate you. Don't let them. Expose this. Shine a light. That's what we're trying to do right now. I hope this ends up on Fox News. I hope this ends up everywhere. I hope this ends up everywhere, because in a town of 1,700, a rural town in Wisconsin, someone came through with they them pronouns and tried to sexualize groups of kids. That's what happened. That's abuse. It's wrong. And it shouldn't be happening. It certainly shouldn't be happening with federal and state tax dollars. And it's time that we got very angry about this. Not just, oh my gosh, let me share it. Get angry about this. And, since I'm going all deep on this, give me a second. And so I'm going to show you a little bit about the group that presented this. So here, let's just go. You know what? I won't show the image. Let's just go to the website. Let's just do that. Give me a minute. There. So start right here. Here we go. So this is your RCC. When you go to their website, this is the first page. And RCC advocates for those harmed by sexual violence, centering on survivors, promoting societal change. So at the beginning part, you think, okay, then it gets to committing to the evolving force for social equity. Right there, there should be spidey senses going off. But okay, state superintendent, administrators, equity is their love language. They hear it so much, they don't think anything of it. So then let's see. Okay, let's do a little bit more digging then. So what do we see next? All right. So here is on their website. Intersectional approach. Intersectionality emphasizes an understanding of how a person's societal and political identities combine to create distinct forms of discrimination and privilege. This includes, but is not limited to, identities such as gender, sexuality, or race. They can have overlapping and interacting impacts on how individuals are treated and the outcomes that they may experience in their areas of life. So this is a group coming in to talk to little children, to small children. And they're telling you that their whole approach is through the lens of intersectionality. They care about political identities, societal identities. Right then and there, hard pass, no. Moving on, we'll find someone else to do the mental health presentation. But no, I guess that was not enough. Again, let's go to one more. I wasn't planning to, sorry that this is taking so long. I was not planning to go into this, but then just started to. Okay, so here we have the presenter. They, them. Director of Outreach, Education, and Prevention. They, them. So this is the woman that gave the kids this. Remember, intersectionality approach. Could it get worse? Oh yes. Oh yes, it can. It can get worse. So let's see. Last one. We'll do one more. I'm going to bring up her. Let's see. Is this the one? Let's see this one. You can see, and okay, they are interested in creating irresistible and accessible entry points into liberatory and healing pedagogy and practices, and are committed to expanding awareness and access of RCC service. You see, all of the words are being used there. So this is an organization that, I'm going to just try to go to their website. Okay, here we go. This will be easier. So let's move this, remove this. Let's just do this the easier way and go to the website. Okay, so here we are. So this is the organization that, through the Project Aware, was contracted to come into the Crandon School District and provide this to children. So then let's go again. We're going to add. So let's look at this website here. So you can see right here all of this. So they've had this the Sexual Violence and Resource Center, but then they started to do these events. So the high school presentations, look at this. Trans joy. Yeah, like understanding sexual violence, high school. But in this instance, in Crandon, it was middle school children. But so you can see their calendar is pretty full of going to high schools, tabling at the Capitol, all of this. And then the leadership. So then we're going to go to, you can see, look at this. She, her, he, him, they, them, all of that. Sorry. But the presenter right here. And then another, so the executive director, I looked up here. She is currently on the board of directors for Outreach, LGBTQ Plus Center, Urban Triage, Freedom Inc., World Builders. She has extensive experience working with persons experiencing homelessness. Her activism extends to all aspects of her life, including art. You can see this. I mean, it's kind of similar, just a lot of activists, and proud of it. So that didn't take very long. You just plug in, do a little research, who's the executive director, who would be the person provide the presentation. Notice that it's mostly high school students that they're giving this presentation to. See that they post that about us. Here are the ABCs of us. We are all about intersectionality, queer theory, critical race. We are a far left group. We view everything through the lens of politics, and we're here to disrupt systems of oppression. Tells you everything you need to know right there. And if you have common sense, you'd say, let's not bring them in to talk about consent. And even if you are just persuaded to do so, hey, let's see your materials first. Let's get a look at those before you hand them out to children. They bring them home to parents. So districts have to do a better job. They'd have to do a better job. But then what we really have to notice is the funding aspect and the ties to mental health, quote unquote, mental health. They said they'll use all of the language. They'll call it a mental health presentation. But instead, the worksheet and the presentation asks, what sexual activities are you in? What turns you on? Anything new you'd like to try? This isn't your typical human growth and development. Well, maybe actually, it might be the typical one now. Not when I was younger. Not when anyone in Gen X was younger. This is adult scripting and grooming in a classroom. Talking about pizza and then pivoting to sexual activity, boundaries, physical sensation, pleasure, arousal, experimentation with young kids, all without getting the consent of parents before talking about these subjects. That you don't just cross a line. You have leaped over a line. This is asking minors to imagine, discuss, and process their sexual interests and repeat sexual activity and experimentation and have these discussions and role play with other adults and other kids. That's not safe. In fact, it's to me predatory. It's very wrong. This worksheet is an example of the product of a mental health grant. Now, the grant money didn't say, hey, we're going to fund this presentation. No, the grant money is supposed to be around mental health. But things like this is what you're paying for. And it happens just too many times. So Wisconsin's DPI Project Aware page says that they received a 5-year grant through SAM HSA to support comprehensive school and mental health systems. This is Project Aware. And comprehensive school mental health framework states that it is a system that is about prevention, early intervention, treatment supports, collaboration, referral pathways, sustainability, and collecting data. So when a district says mental health grant, what should parents do? They should ask a lot of questions. What grant? What partner? What curriculum? What worksheets are provided? We have access to the webpage of the organization that's going to be providing this presentation. That's just the beginning. This whole funding ecosystem around mental health needs to be investigated very thoroughly. Parents need to know where their tax dollars are going, and are they going to bring sexualized material into classrooms at the very least? So that is, there's still, believe it or not, after all of this, there's still a lot for us to discuss. And the whole time I had that up, I have to. So there is still a lot to discuss. I'm sorry, the whole time I had that up, I kept that picture up on screen. One last time, let's look here. It's just so important for parents to continue to be actively engaged in the lives of their children. It's nothing to be embarrassed about, to ask a lot of questions. It's just get used to it. Talk to teachers. I would venture to say that a great many teachers were pretty surprised to see this worksheet. And I would venture to say that a vast majority of staff members were not on board. And that's why they bring in these outside organizations that are perfectly happy to do this, because they're activist organizations. They're funding, they don't have to rely on private sector funding. They get all their money from the government. They very little accountability. They love it. They hate the private sector. They hate when they have to actually provide results, and and people want to know that when they're going to spend $160 to $200 an hour on therapy, they ask a lot of questions. But when the government's doing it, suddenly everyone asks as if Santa Claus drops the money off every year. Those are real dollars. Those are tax dollars. And these are actual children. And they're the children in your community. And it's not appropriate to sit around in a circle with little kids and say, hey, what turns you on? Frankly, if that's happening, if an adult is with your child asking them what turns them on, you should probably call the police. That's what I would do. How dare you? Like, I'm going to call the police. I've got an 8th grade daughter, and I'm telling you, my hair would be on fire, heads would roll, and someone better be in jail if they are going to take my daughter without my consent, my permission, put her off in a circle and have her role play with other boys about what turns her on. That is gross. That is inappropriate. That's abuse. I think it must violate, someone tell me, does that must violate some statutes, right? You can't just like, oh, that's horrible, shocker. Like, think about this. Do you have a 13-year-old child? Do you have a 12-year-old child? If an adult is pulling them aside, asking them questions like, hey, are you kinky? What do you like? What turns you on? Are you okay with that? Is that something you're okay with? Put all the politics aside. Do you think that adults should be in schools asking kids these kinds of questions without parental knowledge or consent? Yes or no? And if you say yes, I question your parenting, very much so. Be honest, it's wrong. And it's funded under mental health. You are giving kids mental health problems that they will have to unpack later on in life. You are not solving them. You are creating them, in my opinion. Sexualizing kids too young is so harmful. And I don't know why adults want to do it, except for something not very good. Because I don't know what kind of adult wants to sneaky, like, sure, I'm going to change. Yeah, I'm going to modify it. But then I don't modify it because these kids deserve to know. Because you know what? They're probably doing all these things and you just don't know it. And I'm going to keep some secrets with them because I'm a cool adult and I'm with it. And I'm like, how dare you have your own kids? Pull all this crap with your own kids. Even then, I would say not a great idea. And someone should be watching closely if you really think that this is something you love to do with other people's children. But at the very least, obtain consent, written consent. Tell parents, hey, we're going to talk about sexual pleasure with your 12 and 13-year-olds. Are you thumbs up, thumbs down? Let us know. Because we think that that's really something appropriate for mental health. You know, there's I think there's a far easier way to talk to kids about consent. To say if someone is touching you and you don't want them to, scream no, punch them, and go tell an adult. Your parent. Say that word. Let's repeat after me. Parents, families. Talk to your parent. And if something is happening at home, teachers are mandatory reporters. Tell a teacher. Tells a counselor. You know, create, that is the meaning of safe space, to provide kids safety so that they can come to you and talk to you about these things, not to give them some pizza worksheet and say, let's talk about pleasure. Give me a break. I don't have a degree in psychology. You don't need one. Okay. And parents, oh, if they tell you, well, you're not a trained. Listen, I've got a brain. And anyone with one can tell you that you don't pull little kids aside and start talking to them about sex and pleasure without their parents' knowledge or consent. And you don't do it in a classroom, and you certainly don't run around pimping yourself out as like, oh, I'm so great. I'm so helping kids with their mental health. Look at me. I'm wonderful. Like, that crazy may work in a communist, like, little enclave of, Madison or LA, maybe that works, but that doesn't fly in a town of 1,700 people in a small rural community. Normal people reject this stuff, as they should. So mental health, okay, does not mean what you think it means. If after we're getting on an hour and I'm going to stop, but if one thing you walk away with, please walk away with this. Don't just blindly say mental health, yay. Don't think that my kid doesn't have a mental health problem, but if someone else does, we should be funding. No, because that curriculum is going to bleed down to your child. And studies are showing, there are now studies, one in particular, Australia, discovered that social emotional learning, introducing kids to mental health concepts, starting to work with them, kids that have no diagnoses of anxiety or depression, they've not had any clinical issues, taking healthy, happy kids and exposing them to a whole, board of all these different, oh, like, let's try this, let's do DBT therapy, let's try this, let's try that. People that might not even be properly and qualified to work with kids on these issues, but they're doing this with perfectly healthy kids. And you know what's happening? They're creating kids that are depressed and filled with anxiety, and their relationships with parents get worse. So, some honest brokers, at least there's some honest researchers that have said, we've got to stop doing this. It's not working. But when in America, there are billions of dollars on the line, you can bet your bottom dollar that you're going to find a lot of school districts that are suddenly very interested in mental health because they want the money. They will jump through hoops, they will get that money, and then they can hire another teacher, they can hire another counselor. They're going for the money, and then all that they have to do to get the money is they have to get some presenter to come in. We get this money over 5 years, and maybe they're thinking we can use this for real good. Let's give them a break, and we're going to use this for real good. All we have to do is have a presenter come in with some worksheet on pizza and talk about sexual pleasure and consent. That's the price we have to pay. Okay. Well, first of all, that won't be the end of it, and that's the price too high. So now I think let's start this conversation with Mom Colbey Decker, because we're going to touch on some of this, and she's going to talk about her experience with her son. Her son, who's diagnosed with dyslexia, had an IEP, had all the things lined up. He was supposed to get supports. And when they moved to the Green Bay School District and they talked with the administrators, and they expected, of course, here we've got a diagnosis here, we've got all the legal documentation, the medical documentation, my child needs help. They were told, well, sorry, but your kid's the wrong color. We prioritize our services, our special ed, based on the color of skin. And since you have a white little boy, he goes on the waiting list, even though he had disabilities that were more severe than the other kids that were the right, and I hate to say this, but the right race. They had a race-based policy as far as providing services for children with special needs. That's DEI. And so let's go talk to Colbey, who I will have back on. She was amazing, amazing mom. And I think y'all going to really enjoy this interview. So until next time, here we go. Hi, everyone. This is me, Scarlett Johnson, and this is Unleashed. And today we are talking about something really important. We're talking about something that's bigger than one district, one policy, one state. What is happening in Wisconsin is happening in all 50 states all across this country because of DEI. And let me assure you, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is not dead. It is not dead. Now, we are a lot more aware, and we have an administration that is working very hard to rid are educational institutions of DEI, as well as lots of other government institutions, but it is so deeply embedded that this is going to be a long endeavor. Like I always say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But educational institutions have stopped seeing children as individual human beings, and they have started to view them through the lens of race. This is critical race theory. And lots of times parents were told, oh, we're not teaching critical race theory in the classrooms. Critical race theory is a lens through which all things are viewed and through which institutions are disrupted and deconstructed and all the words that they use. But basically, it's so-called anti-racist, anti-biased, but it's actually, in my opinion, teaching children to be biased, teaching kids how to be racist, and making institutions actually racist as they put kids into these categories. And today I am joined by a mom who's had to deal with this personally. She has got a very real story about how DEI affected her child, her son. There are very real victims to this DEI policy. And so I'm glad to have Mom Colbey Decker here with me. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. And I appreciate getting to share my son's story because, as you said, he is a very real victim. He has dyslexia, which is fairly common learning disability, and he needs lots of extra help learning how to read. And that's okay. It just is. And we're gonna get him the help he needs. And after years of receiving help, we transferred into our home school district, the Green Bay Area Public School District. And upon our arrival, to our shock, he was waitlisted for services. So here's a child who has a diagnosis, who's been getting help, and then all of a sudden he's waitlisted for a significant amount of time. And what changed was I found a school success plan that stated that they prioritized additional literacy resources to First Nation, Black, and Hispanic students. And since he didn't fit that category, he wasn't a priority. And so subsequently, I reached out to Will, and they helped file a civil rights complaint on his behalf. And I'm proud to say that the Department of Education Office of Civil Rights has opened 2 investigations into his case. One about race discrimination, but also school districts have an obligation to seek out and find children they believe to have a disability. It's called the Child Find Mandate. And so they're investigating whether they violated that as well. So that's how my son became a victim, and I started the journey of, but how did he become a victim? And it wasn't just Green Bay, and I found the Green Bay policies and the practices, but then it kind of grew from there because we're seeing other school districts and other victims. And so it's really reached a state level. This is being pushed down from a state leadership level.
How old was your son when you knew that he had this reading difficulty? When was he diagnosed?
He was 6 years old, and we have a significant family history of dyslexia. So we knew what we were looking for. He was being monitored. And so it was a fairly significant deal to get that formal diagnosis to rush him with the resources that he needed.
Was that an IEP?
Well, he was at a charter school, so it's the equivalent of a student support plan. So when a child is in there, it should automatically be converted, but the Green Bay district ignored that and just said, oh, no, he has to start over.
Wow. And then, so he needs supports, and with supports, children with dyslexia grow up to be very successful adults. There are a lot of famous adults that have struggled with dyslexia, you know, actor Tom Cruise, the owner of Home Depot. These are all like great success stories. So with the help that can be provided now more than ever, these kids can not only thrive, they can really just achieve great things, but they need that support early on.
It's critical. If the sooner you can rush resources to someone struggling with reading, the sooner they can get to where they need to be, and you can open up resources for other children. And especially with children in dyslexia, you see if they fall through the cracks and they don't get diagnosed until later in life, they've been so frustrated that it's hard to re-motivate them to start that journey again. That's why it's so important. And he was on that journey and he kept asking, why, like, when are they going to help? I know I need help with reading. Like, this isn't something new. This isn't something we're ashamed of. It just was. And that was the worst part, was he didn't understand why they wouldn't help him.
Yes. And kids are their brain, the way that we're wired as humans, the earlier that they can start to make the connections and phonetics and reading, the better success that they're going to have. That's why kids learn languages really fast when they're young, and it's much harder for us as adults to learn them. It's just the way that our brains are wired, and any educator should know this and should understand why it's so important to get a child the resources they need when they've been diagnosed with a reading disability, dyslexia. I myself understand this process very well because my youngest child was diagnosed with a reading disability. So the faster that you can get that attention, and usually associated with that sometimes are speech issues, speech and language issues. So you need to get those supports in as early as possible if your child is going to reach, by the time they get to junior high. Lots of times for my own daughter, like she's already, her IEP for speech is no longer necessary, but we had to get the supports in really, really early so that it could come to a point where we could celebrate the fact that she no longer needs speech therapy services. She's, conquered this, and with a lot of work. So obviously every parent is advocating for that. How did you know, when did it occur to you that you needed to do some digging to find out that there's something wrong? They're not giving your son the services that he needs, and there's more afoot than what they're telling you.
So he entered the district in January of 24, and that's when he was waitlisted. And the mountain of previous interventions that he had for years, it became so apparent, it didn't make any sense. And so then in the fall, we're re-entering the school district, and I reach out and they're like, we're going to waitlist him again, or we're going to put him in a tier 2, which is a group type setting, which is not nearly as intensive as what he had been having and what he requires. So I'm digging around on the school website, and that's when I found that school success plan. And that's when it led to, well, is this just a school? Is this just building specific? Is this the district? And it opened a whole can of worms to what had been implemented within the Green Bay School District.
So Colbey, I'm going to play the video that was released by the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty that gives a very short introduction into your story. Oops, wrong one. Sorry, hold on. Got it right here. Right, we're going to play.
He was exhibiting all the classic signs of dyslexia, where learning basic letters was really challenging. And then at the end of first grade, he was tested using a Wade's test. We were given verification that, yes, he does have dyslexia.
Colbey Decker is fighting to get her child the education he deserves. Her son is a 4th grader at King Elementary in Green Bay, Wisconsin. He has dyslexia and requires reading interventions. However, the Green Bay Area Public School District delayed for almost a year to provide him with the support he needs.
My son is in the 17th percentile, and he's being pushed out of services for children who are higher performing.
The reason for this? The school has a policy that allocates additional educational resources based on students' race, prioritizing certain races over others.
I couldn't believe that someone would actually withhold services because of the color of someone's skin. It was so barbaric and so out of any frame of mind. I never imagined that in this day we could possibly look at a child and just say, sorry, you don't get reading support because we're going to give it to someone else.
Under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, programs receiving federal funds, such as public schools, are prohibited from discriminating based on race. Racial discrimination also violates the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution.
Anytime a child is delayed in receiving services, it affects that child for the rest of their life because I can't get that time back.
The Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty is stepping in to help Mrs. Decker fight for her son, because fighting for your child is what any parent would do.
It is my job as a mom to stand in the gap for my children. Any mom, dad, grandparent who's advocating, they want nothing more than their child to be treated equally. I would like to see the Green Bay School District adopt a policy of being totally colorblind, providing services to whoever needs the help.
Wow, that's a very powerful story. How does it make you feel watching that?
We've come a long way. My son, every week he is making gains, and I am so proud of him. We've, as a family, have made it a priority to provide him private resources as well, just to rush him with those resources. But it really makes me sad for all the parents who know something is wrong, but they can't figure out what it is. And DEI is most likely at the tip of the spear of why something isn't working, whether their classroom isn't safe, whether the priorities are not where they should be. It all leads back to DEI.
So again, I know something about this. The fact that you have to engage private resources is very shocking, because Wisconsin has specific funding, specific grants for kids with these types of reading and learning disabilities. They can take those grants and they can use them sometimes, if available, in private school, public school, but schools are allotted a large chunk of money per child enrolled in a public school system to provide these services to kids like your son. And the fact that they are being provided and allocated those funds, but not using them on your son, and then you have to engage private outside help, should shock taxpayers, because the funding that you think that's going to fund special ed, you think that, okay, yeah, this is something we absolutely need to do. And Jill Underly goes before you and says, we need more money to fund special education. And even some Wisconsin Republicans fall into the trap of thinking, yeah, we've got to make sure that we help these kids, but they aren't. These funds are being wasted. They are often becoming part of a slush fund for DEI projects. That's very unfortunate. A very unfortunate thing for me to say, and it's a very unfortunate thing that's happening. So how are you dealing with this in your school district?
So in our district, when we had his initial IEP meeting, it was really important. He had been using a program. It's called the Wilson Reading System. It's like a gold standard for dyslexia, but it works for all children because it's a phonics based. It's just a very methodical program. It's something he has been using for years. And we said, hey, I would really like him to have the continuity of care and continue on that. And hey, I also know that you have a reading specialist in this building who is being trained on it. And the answer was no. No, this is your option. I sat in an IEP meeting and they offered a program and they tried selling it as this amazing program. We think it would be so great for your son. And I was like, I'm not signing off on that till I research it. I go home and I research it. It's a program specifically designed for English language learners who have fallen out of love and have become frustrated with learning the English language. And so that would be nice for them because they could just lump resources and just put them in with the English language learners, but that's not providing him any of the specialized resources he needs. So unfortunately, I have found with the Green Bay School District that it's so big and people are very scared to speak out against the district. And so instead of trying to advocate internally, I have been advocating around the district.
Yes.
I think that has been more effective at creating change. They have had to change some of their equity statements, but we know that's not really changing the spirit of what they're trying to accomplish. But I'll take that win any day.
So as you started this fight for helping your son, you started to become a master researcher. And I know this, you have a great X account. You post a lot, you do a lot of deep dives, and that kind of, falls in line with what you have done as a profession. So what have you found when doing these deep dives?
So if we look at a lot of the problems, we get frustrated as parents. Other parents reach out and they're really excited because a civil rights investigation has been opened. And that's a wonderful thing. The Civil Rights Office is very much trying to get enough lawyers to fill and get rid of the backlog. But I think districts have come to realize that it's going to take 3 to 5 years unless we get these lawyers in there. So they're very emboldened. And
Yes.
then on top of that, you have Dr. Underly, our state superintendent, who's refusing to acknowledge the new DEI ban by the Trump administration. She's refusing to sign off on that. And so that led me to find the formal DEI timeline. I've been working on it, piecing it together, but I found the Department of Public Instruction's victory lap, if you will, of how they've gone through and done the long march through the institution of education here in Wisconsin.
I'm going to play a few clips of Jill Underly, and yeah, I know like this will go out nationwide. She just represents most bureaucrats in education. Most of those, yet we don't all have the great heads of education like in Florida and some other states. Most of us, even in some red states, don't have the best people in charge of education. It's a field full of activists, and that would be a whole nother show to talk about education training and all of that. I've gone through that with Daniel Buck and Alvin Liu and Corey DeAngelis and James Lindsay and so many others. I think anyone who's watching this understands that whole, the DEI swamp. But as I play this could be Illinois, this could be Pennsylvania, California, Colorado, New York, New Jersey, Vermont, Maine, so many different places, even in some counties in Indiana, in Ohio, in red states, where in Kansas recently, where you have school districts that are in bluer areas where they're bound and determined to wait out President Trump. They think all we have to do is wait out the president. So they're going to stall. The same people that told you that the minute the ink dried on Joe Biden's rewrite of Title IX, you had to pass it. We could not lose federal funding. Oh my Lord, the whole world will collapse. Are the people that are like, oh, well, we're just going to wait and see what the court says, or they're going to find some obscure passage in their state statute somewhere to say that there's a way that around this we're actually in compliance with Title IX, or they're in a blue state where they feel perfectly comfortable just thumbing their nose at President Trump. So while I'm playing a clip of Jill Underly in Wisconsin, this could be, anywhere in America. So
Children's communities, their classrooms are also some of the most inclusive and equitable places in our state. This is thanks again to their diversity and the fact that public schools are for everyone. And it is also despite the push from some leaders to try and homogenize learning in a way that is just not reflective of historical or current reality, nor of a child's lived experience. It is also thanks to intentional community building and social emotional learning in our classrooms that creates a deep understanding of educational equity among our students.
all the feels are in there.
While we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and about how meeting the needs of our most vulnerable learners is actually helpful to all, let me share a couple reminders. First of all, this is a good moment to remember that the curriculum, which reflects the diversity of the human struggle and progress, is in fact reflective of the history of this country, and that affirming the lives of our Black, Indigenous, and students of color matter, and it's not political. It's a statement of fact. Also, it bears remembering that the safety of all kids is a requisite for every kid, and creating safety for LGBTQ+ kids is not controversial. It's the bare minimum, because every kid in this state is our kid, and we need to make sure all kids are accepted and safe. Because all of this, diversity, equity, inclusion in our schools, all of it makes it possible for our kids to thrive academically and personally, to thrive as unique learners and as unique children. All the problems and accusations that we lob at each other, they're adult problems. They're not kid problems. We as adults and as leaders are so busy fighting about issues that our children have moved so far beyond. Honestly, our kids are the ones who are forward-thinking and are future-focused.
They say that until kids like Ella Fry stand up and say, I don't want boys in my bathroom. And then suddenly the kids need to shut up, be quiet, follow the map to the single stall bathroom, and just be kind. You know, so when kids come out and protest and say, we don't want your DEI, we don't think it's fair, when they look at the numbers of boys who are suffering uniquely under DEI, especially white males, when they look at the fact that there are less boys going to college, less boys in STEM, boys are feeling anxiety, depression, all of those things because of this extreme push of DEI and girl boss, and I guess the best woman is a man dressed like a woman. They take no responsibility for what they've done, and they are all for the kids when they can have a small group of radicalized children that have been thoroughly indoctrinated, brought up before a school board to yell and scream. But they aren't there when those same kids become detransitioners like Chloe Cole. Then they drop them like a hot potato and they say, no, Chloe, you can't sue because you can never get your breasts back, or you may not be able to have children. So these people do not care about children. They didn't care about your son. They don't care about the transgender kids. They don't care about Black kids, because just look at the numbers of the Black literacy rates in Milwaukee. They are abysmal. Wisconsin is dead last in teaching Black and brown students to read and to do math. So if they actually cared about those kids, they would do something different. Instead, they doubled down on DEI, feel good stuff that they can run around blaming and pointing fingers at someone else, instead of looking in the mirror and thinking, what have we done wrong? We need to course correct. And that's my TED talk, but it really gets me excited to watch. And you notice where she gets the most excited. And this is true for all of these Democrats and all of these far left woke activists. They get the most excited when they start to talk about DEI and trans kids. And like they really, that's just their like,
He talks a lot about being forward. Kids are forward thinking. And you see this in the Eau Claire School District. That is one of the most radical school boards. This is also the location where the professor flipped over the right college kids students table. They flipped up. They're married. One of the board members is married to that professor, and she is giving a speech in the middle of a school board meeting about how they have to have all of the trans identity and LGBTQ material for small children in the district, because children understand it. Children are more accepting. Well, of course they are. Children are very impressionable, and she doesn't understand why these loving families are trying to protect them. She's over there trying to say, no, I know they're susceptible, and that's why I want them. And Jill is using that same language of these are our children, and they're very forward thinking. And so a lot of the materials that you can find, they talk about having courageous conversations,
Yes.
but they also talk about being a master at that. And with a lot of the other equity training is you have to be willing to call out other people if they're not willing to call out inequities and supremacy and systems. And so I think this is the first time we're starting to see these kids calling that out. You know, they've been primed, they've been waiting, and communists like to use the phrase spark seeker. Like they got to try to find something that gives them purpose and they can rally behind. And I think that they've created a monster, and they've gone so far that I don't even think they know how bad it's going to get before this is undone.
So now, we have been exposing at Moms for Liberty for a long time, and now everyone is starting to realize that SPLC is in our schools and its curriculum is very dangerous. And this group is just a bunch of frauds. Defending Ed has released a comprehensive report about SPLC in schools, and I think everyone should take a look at that. And we have been villainized and targeted at Moms for Liberty, and me personally, by the Southern Poverty Law Center since our inception, but since 2021. They doubled down pretty hard in 2023 when they classified us as a hate group, an anti-government group, and domestic terrorist organization. But it turns out they were actually funding the KKK, or they're allegedly, but they 11 counts of fraud from the Department of Justice and some solid proof because a grand jury indicted them that they were actually funding Aryan Nation, KKK, actual Nazi groups, formal Nazi groups. They were funding them. They were funneling millions of dollars into these organizations so that they could manufacture hate in order so that they could continue to raise money. And they raised a lot of money over the last few years, villainizing moms like me, like you, calling us names, calling us racist, when in fact they were the ones actually funding all of these groups. Their curriculum is in Wisconsin. It's all over the country. It's in 42 states. It's the Learning for Justice. There was another name for it too. They've changed the name, but they have curriculum for kids as early as 5 years old. So I think you're right. They are teaching kids. Have you uncovered anything about SPLC in your research?
So DPI heavily uses them to create their policies and practices. And a lot of times when you go and you do these searches on DPI's website, they're going to show up in footnotes. They're going to show up in positive behavior, PBIS, right to intervention, all of those things. And so they're not going to come out necessarily and just have the material right there. But what they're going to do is they're going to reference it and put it in the footnotes, but they're using it. And the other fascinating thing is, so you get it coming from the top down with the Department of Public Instructions, and then you're getting it from the local teachers union, the Wisconsin, the WEAC. They still have it on their website as a great resource. And DPI has courses on their trusted course provided supplies. They have multiple of them available.
They have it embedded like here, mental health. So this mental health resource cites the Southern Poverty Law Center, and they'll, like you said, they will put that in the footnotes. In lessons, they give guidance to school districts. Here are some resources that you should use. I mean, that's just really the tip of the iceberg. This is what they put out publicly. Like there's the discretion of school districts to use whole curriculum of SPLC, and they do. But what I have found through my research over the last week is that there are so many references and links to the Southern Poverty Law Center, and it's being used in SEL, it's being used in curriculum, it's being used in civics, it's even being used in math. They're using it, they're framing math equations using this social justice language that is recommended by SPLC. So they're not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. They are getting grant money. They get funding. This all goes into the pipeline. And the biggest moneymaker right now is mental health. Mental health, because even Republicans will sign on to these types of bills. They will say, oh yeah, we care about mental health. Of course they do. So without paying too close of attention, it all sounds good. They allot money. And then this pipeline continues. So SPLC wants a piece of this pie. So they start to create curriculums and guidance where you can incorporate this anti-racist bias. Don't you want to do that? Isn't that great for the mental health of kids? You know, we can make them all anti-racist, and everyone's like, oh yeah, what a great idea. And we can introduce some queer theory in there. Won't that be great for, like, we're going to teach tolerance. So all of that starts to get embedded into the programs. And you've provided a timeline that you found about DEI, and I want to bring that up. But while I'm doing that, if there's anything you want to add to what I was saying.
No, I think that what really happened is Governor Evers became state superintendent in 2009. And you can see the starting works of that. They're starting to work on positive behavior, and that's when you see restorative justice practices get introduced. That's when you see, that's really the inflection point of when did schools start to become more violent? Well, if you want equitable outcomes in discipline, either you have to have less poor behavior, or you have to change the very definition of what can get you expelled. And so that's how those are the levers that they use. So you just kind of flow through here and you can see them slowly building. And so then they start acknowledging that there is an achievement gap in Wisconsin between students, but they want to make it about race. They don't want to make the achievement gap about, is the child in a single family child? Is the child in foster care? Is the child have two parents? And we know that those things matter and they're important, but we can't social engineer everything. But if we make it about race, then they can try and socially engineer. And that's where they really went into, is it's all about an equity lens of people who have been historically marginalized or disadvantaged. And it sounds noble, but it's just racism, and it leads to nothing good. So the really big inflection point is when Governor Evers becomes president of the CCSSO. And that's the Chief Council of State Superintendents. And he has 1 year to serve in that position and shape policy for the chiefs of the state superintendents. And he chooses equity. And he makes that his mission. And he figures out how to nudge, how to socially engineer the power that state superintendents have to force these small districts, even large districts, to comply. So he talks about how you can use local educational agencies. That's why a lot of districts love having community outsource. They call it community outreach, but if they have a third party providing, Girls Who Code, or, all these unique specific things that can be, Black Lives, Black Boys Futures clubs that they've had in Madison. We're not doing it. We're having a community partner do it. That's how they they go about doing that. But that was really the document that hit an exponential level with DEI in the country.
And so it starts when he becomes, you said when he becomes the state superintendent. And the timeline here, and that's why what I would say is you can ignore the fact that this is the future Wisconsin Governor, Tony Evers. The timeline here is so similar across the country. It's almost as if they got marching orders and it all just begins. The groundwork had been laid, and if you talk to friends in California, they can tell you that they started to see this 2008, 2009, 2010. And all that groundwork is laid. And the same in Wisconsin, I think not quite as outspoken. But after the Trump presidency, it's like a switch is flipped, 2016, 2017. And things just go into overdrive. Not to say, again, I have videos I have sorted through trainings that go back as far as 2008, 2009, all during the Obama administration, where the groundwork is clearly being laid. And a lot of DEI, a lot of the whole equity and everything that we see was being built. It was really like built during that time. But I feel like the real activation started to happen 2016, 2017. So it really tracks what you say with Governor, with Tony Evers, he wasn't governor yet, but this is the same across the country.
Yeah, we're just able to have a clear timeline. And I've reached out to friends in multiple states who do research, and no one has ever had a clear timeline. No one's ever been able to have as much detail as this timeline has. And so you start to see after this acceleration, you start to see DPI, the library team, they go ahead and start taking over libraries, and they take over the curriculum. And you see the George Floyd movement, and they just made everything exponentially more. They kept doubling down. And I think they probably saw that they weren't moving the needle on achievement. And so they in their mind were like, we're just not doing it hard enough. We're not doing it enough, which was the exact opposite of what the data should have been telling them. The achievement gap is getting worse. Race relations are getting worse. Schools are not as safe. So there's been this doubling down. And I think we're going to be reaching another inflection point, because this isn't sustainable. Our test scores are not sustainable. People are fleeing. People are asking for school choice. But Evers and Underly just keep digging in instead of saying, you know what, let's get back to basics. Yep. Let's get back to math and reading, and quite frankly, taking away all the things that community schools have become. We can't do that. They have to do the fundamentals well.
So I have a video of Tony Evers. Let's put this on.
For those of you who don't know, I'm from Wisconsin, sound like it. And I spent a year as CCSSO president, and one of the perks of that job is to choose an area that you want to have the chiefs think about, respond to, and take some action. And I chose equity, and you might think, so why is a guy from Wisconsin choosing equity as his mantra going forward for that year? And I have to tell you, inequities abound in our state. Whether it's racial inequities, whether it's kids with disabilities, whether it's foster kids, whether it's kids that come from just extraordinarily difficult backgrounds that need that extra lift. That is absolutely an issue in our state. And actually, I believe that it is not only an issue in our state, it's an issue in every single state in the United States of America. It's a moral imperative of our time. Clearly, we're not going to erase inequities in 1 year, but by golly, we have a roadmap to do this as states. So promoting excellence for all, that's what's really defined our chiefs and our discussions over the last year, and I know that will continue. So I have to, first of all, talk about my colleagues who selected me as president, and their stepping up to the plate on this issue has been nothing short of heartwarming. They've every time we've been together, and even when we're not, we're talking about equity. Made a commitment as an agency, and all 400 or 500 employees made that similar commitment to work on equity. We've had two staff meetings in the interim where we spoke as individuals and as teams in our agency what we're doing in each individual person in the agency as it relates to equity in their area. In addition, we're encouraging, and I guess compelling would be a different word, compelling each staff member and their teams to go to participate in a long PD program, a professional development program called Embracing Equity. We have trained people within our own department to lead those discussions. And finally, every new employee to our agency goes through an onboarding process. You know, not only where do I get my check, but more importantly, how do we operate within our school community with 424 school districts. And each one of those employees in the onboarding process also goes through a significant issue around talking through the equity issues that face our state. So I feel confident within a very short period of time, we're going to have a group of people that can outdo me on this equity business. And that's a really important thing. They're the folks that are doing the work in schools. So thank you so much for this. I couldn't be prouder of the work of my colleagues across this.
I've never seen that video before. That is shocking. I am going to be dissecting that. My jaw, I feel like, is on the floor. What he said, he just admitted just everything. Compelling to basically do equity, to do Marxism, do communism, to do all of this stuff. They're compelling the teachers. And like he said, he feels confident that his predecessors are going to even do more than he did. And they are. The damage is real. The wake of DEI is terrible. It's a terrible thing that has happened since they have been implementing this equity agenda across the board. There isn't a single school district that is doing better. A good school district is not in as much as decline as others. That's the best that you can say. A good school district is there are a couple of very good school districts in Wisconsin with non-woke school boards, but even it is a constant struggle, and it is difficult for these school board members to continue to do this arduous work and fight the Department of Education and teachers unions and all the things. This is a hard thing to do across the country. School board members they are doing the Lord's work, literally what they're doing in fighting this whole DEI Goliath. But what did you think? How did you find that video? Where did you find it?
So I found Tony Evers basically what he's most proud of. You know, what are my accomplishments? And that is a highly notable moment in his career. And so I knew I had to find as much as I could about his time there. And it makes sense because I'm really nerdy. I bought a copy of his dissertation and I read it, and it's really boring and it's very juvenile and undergraduate level. But his whole premise is how do you make a superintendent more effective? Is a superintendent who is task orientated or goal orientated? And I kind of laugh because this is a very undergraduate management level idea that he is struggling with for his dissertation. And so I knew from reading that he's basically trying to social engineer outcomes.
Yes.
He's trying to nudge. He's trying to use behavioral science to get inequities out of public schools, which is a noble thought. But they went about it in the most racist possible way of sorting children and color coding them. And they use data in such a way, at such a granular level, that it takes away so much context. But yes, we could have African American students in a certain building falling behind, but that's not the only feature of those children. We have to look at, you know, are they in the McKinney-Vento program? Do they have two parents? Are they, what is their life? The individual characteristics about them. And DEI strips away all of that. And so it is frightening that DEI really tries to socially engineer outcomes. And it's been used by people who are not behavioral scientists. And so
No.
when you study organizational performance, you study goal setting theory, but you're taught goal setting theory is the most dangerous theory on earth, because if you don't map out every unintended consequence, then you don't know what you're doing, because most times no goal is better than the wrong goal. And this is so apparent in school safety issues. So we're over suspending Black or Hispanic students. So we try restorative justice and other programs, but that's not working. So they give up and they get frustrated and they change the disciplinary standards of what it takes to get taken out of a room, to get expelled. And you see that in district after district, that they know it's not working, so they just manipulate whatever levers they can.
They've built a theory on a faulty premise, on many faulty premises. They have decided to, again, like you said, socially engineer education. So they've taken, there's no science to reading anymore. They're not actually interested in science and math and data. They're focused on their feelings. They're focused on their politics. They're focused on, they've been reading Paulo Freire, and that's their mantra. They're Gloria Ladson-Billing. They're going to, they really have, like, he is, I think, one of the true believers, in like he grew in the 70s and this was his whole mantra. So gets the job, like, finally, I can fix this problem just the way all of the Marxist philosophers told me to do it. And we can create this beautiful world. All we have to do is root out whiteness and capitalism and Christianity and Western civilization. We've got to dismantle all these systems. Like Audre Lorde, you've got to tear down the master's house. Okay. You've got to rebuild a whole new system. And you need whole new tools to do it. So they throw out all of the old, all the knowledge, everything, and they think they can rebuild this new world. And turns out they discover that it doesn't work. Everything's getting worse. And instead of admitting that failure, they can't do that. They just say, we need more. We need more. We're just not doing it hard enough. We need more of the Marxism. We need more of our theory. It's just then they look at President Trump and MAGA, and that's their new villain. That's their new bad guy. They make Moms for Liberty. Oh, we'd be doing great if not for this group. And so I think the SPLC becomes a very useful tool for these organizations to demonize all of the people that are their ideological, nemesis. And then no one has to listen to them anymore. They call them names, they other them. So they don't listen to Scarlett, even though she's Puerto Rican, even though she grew up in the city of Milwaukee, her parents had nothing. And it's through education, not their education, actual good education that was provided by Catholic Charity, that she and her family were actually able to get out of the ghettos and build a wonderful life and have children that go to medical school and law school and all of that. The American dream. No, don't look at her. She's a racist white supremacist. Yes, she's a Puerto Rican white supremacist. Look at me. I'm a white guy, but I feel your pain. Listen to me. And it defies logic, but that's the world that they live in, because logic is not their friend. They especially hate the Clarence Thomases. They hate people like me. They hate they hate gays against groomers. They hate any of the marginalized who are against them and who point out that the emperor has no clothes, because all they have is their virtual signaling. They have no virtue, and it's all they're left with is their lies, their house of cards. I get very, very passionate about this because education is the way to actually provide the American dream to so many Americans that have not yet been able to fulfill that dream, to so many children that go hungry. I mean, it's not as many as they'd like to say, but there are children that don't have what they need, and they could get it if only our education system worked. And we spend so much money on it. It should work. It should be a shining light in the world. With the money that America spends on education, we spend so much money. Half of our property taxes go to it. They should be wonderful. They should be functioning. We shouldn't even need private schools because they should be so good, but they're terrible. And even the schools that are good, technically on paper, are mired up in social justice so that they're brainwashing kids. It's very, I can't, one of my rants.
Well, you're right. I mean, and what we found is mental health is the new thing. And so as you go through the timeline, but we just need to, if we just try this one new program, you know what, if we just do this, it'll finally work. Our utopia will finally work when all of it needs to be rooted out. And we need to get back to what education has been and what education should be. And one of the most telling things is if you go to the Mississippi Department of Education and you look at their mission and goals, and it talks about math and reading and, you know, preparing these children. And if you look at the Wisconsin DPI, it's equity. Equity is their number one priority. And we've seen that priority over the last 15 years, and it doesn't work. And it's okay to say that. And it's okay to say that there are so many good teachers out there who have just been bombarded by this system because all of these things have been imposed on top of them. And so we just have to unleash the system. We know how to teach kids how to read. We know how to teach kids math. We know that, but we have to stop social engineering and being a behavioral scientist and experimenting with our education system. That's got to stop.
So going back to the timeline, so you've discovered it through a March 2020 article by New America. And you said that this timeline is very unique because most cannot, put the exact day, but this was done by Tony Evers himself, right?
Absolutely. This was a victory lap. So he's coming off of his time at the CCSO, and then he's doubling down. They're building things like a Big Five cohort in Wisconsin, which is taking the 5 largest school districts, and they're getting together for weekly meetings on how to best put DEI into their schools. And we see the Big Five in Wisconsin are failing the most and the fastest. But this people, they put it underground. They know that the Trump administration is very serious. It learned a lot of lessons, and it knows that it has to get this out of the educational system. So they like to rebrand things. They like to say, oh, it's not DEI. It's just, we want an inclusive community. We want everyone to feel welcome. But you have to understand how sophisticated these things are. They created a coaching network in Wisconsin, and DPI still manages this coaching network. And they have a spreadsheet where they track how people are willing to call out systems of oppression. Are you willing to talk about the white supremacy in our nation's history? That's an actual spreadsheet that is still used today to keep people in line with their equity coaching.
So does DPI now, when, and again, this is the same, I'm actually, I cannot, that's very shocking to me, I'm writing that down, but so they will offer, there will be instances where a school district will be required to obtain professional development, this sort of equity coaching. And then the school district will have to pay for that. And then they'll be, I would imagine this spreadsheet is a list of different organizations that you can hire to come in and do an equity audit. We talked about this a lot back in 2021, 2022, 2023 equity audits. When a school district had to do an equity audit or chose to do one, you know, lo and behold, the audit always came back positive for you are racist and you need to hire us for 5 years and give us a, you know, 6-figure contract. And they will go in and find all of the things and then, you know, put your staff through trainings. And even in my school district, they put parents through trainings, something that I talked about a lot back in 2022. So I'm looking at going back to the timeline. This is so interesting. We're going to have another talk because we both are going to have to get kids, but this is all very fascinating. Your timeline, the timeline that you uncovered starts with September 2nd, 2009. And again, that tracks with what we just talked about. So who becomes president but Barack Obama, President Obama. And that signals that the federal government is going to start really investing in DEI, heavily investing. Things are going to change. And I think that signal is heard across the country. So there is an introduction to courageous conversation and equity strategic planning meeting with Glenn Singleton of the Pacific Education Group. And if you don't know, then you don't know like who Glenn Singleton is. But those of us who have been in this fight for a long time know exactly who he is and what Courageous Conversations actually does. That's a huge discovery.
Courageous Conversations is used all the time. They have bookstore studies that DPI has that you can do within your district. Here's all the materials, here's the questions to ask. And one thing about the Obama administration that is so important, it's the first time that behavioral scientists were part of the administration. And that's when Cass Sunstein came in and his famous book, Nudge. And so they use these behavioral tactics of, we're going to give you free will, but it's only the illusion of free will. And we're going to give you choices, but they're not really choices. They're nudging you in the direction. And that's what you see with the teacher's curriculum. It's a giant circular reference, but people underestimate how nefarious this is. This isn't, oh, we want to do something nice. There are over 600 employees at Wisconsin DPI. That's a lot of people that their sole focus, their number one goal, they just reaffirmed it, is DEI. And in their internal system, Fred, every department has DEI goals.
Yep. And so that's thumbing the nose, despite the warnings, despite the policies, the executive orders, the threats to withhold funding, they aren't changing anything. They are not in compliance. We have 2010 state equity leadership team is created, and training and courageous conversations beyond race and beyond diversity is provided. So this professional learning, but in 2010 is provided across the state. Again, this is happening everywhere. So everywhere. If you're wondering, how did this happen? Go back to exactly what Colbey said. You have Barack Obama as president, and then you've got this huge investment, this huge financial investment. You bring in behavioral scientists. This is the guy who studied under Derek Bell, who pioneered critical race theory. So they bring in a lot of social justice advocates. They bring in activists. He's a community organizer. Community organizers are empowered. They are funded, and they're ready to go. And again, there are many books built that talk about how this system was years and years in the making. So it didn't just even happen when Obama was president. It 20 years of work went into laying the groundwork, into training, getting into law schools, getting into schools of education, completely taking them over and making it so that it's very difficult to hire a teacher, an administrator who isn't thoroughly well versed and indoctrinated in all of these critical theories. This is just, it's sort of just par for the course.
There's a coaching document because it's like a pyramid scheme. It's self-replicating and self-amplifying. And
Yep.
so if you become a coach and you want to recruit more coaches, DPI created a questionnaire of things you could ask to surface whether they would be a good coach or not. And so at this point, I don't know who's left.
Neither do really private schools, and that's it. You've got private schools and people that have had the courage to acknowledge that what they're doing isn't working, and that they go on to start charter schools. You've got, and I meet them all the time. And they're not necessarily conservatives or Republicans. They're just honest brokers that really want to see education work. We just need more of them. They're just, there's now some opportunity for teachers to, with Teacher Freedom Alliance, to escape teachers' unions and still get benefits provided by them. So we are building the systems. It takes time. And I think that's one thing I want to stress when I talk about how it took so long to get here. It's so that you can understand that it's going to take a very long time to build our own systems and to reverse all of this. This isn't a one administration thing. This is a multi-administration effort. It's going to take sustained effort and a lot of commitment by parents to, even when your kids are out of the K-12 schools, that you're still going to have to care about this for your grandkids, and grandparents are going to have to care, and aunts and uncles, because this is the heart and soul of America. How we raise our children, they are the future. And if we are not educating them, they will be prime for propaganda. They will be taught not to think too critically. They will not be engaged. They will learn to just hate politics and just tune out, or become so overly political that it becomes their family, their religion, and they find a new family, like they like to say. So there's a lot going on here by people who, what's really sad is that children are compelled to be in these classrooms, and you've got very talented propagandists who know how to manipulate children and even how to manipulate parents. And that's our job here, is to demystify this for you so that you can see what you're up against and kind of shake it up and say, nope, you can't, you're not going to be able to use that language on me. It doesn't work. I know what's really going on, and I'm going to continue to fight. But with the time left, I want to go through some more of this timeline. You've got principal by 2012 acknowledgement of the achievement gap. That becomes a huge buzzword, and they base it on race. And this is where now departments of education across the country start to look at all of their data and break it up into racial categories. And they start to play numbers games with the data, because if they don't, then parents will know how bad it's actually, how bad it actually is. So they give districts points. They manipulate the every year there's reporting done. And I'm sure and I know you've talked about this, Colbey. Wisconsin isn't the only one. We've got NAEP scores that are the national kind of the way that report card for parents and for all of us to see how well our schools are doing, but they manipulate the data so much. How do they do that?
They have levers. So when you have a goal and you want the achievement gap to change, either you do the hard work and you have really great materials for math and reading, and you have really great teachers, and you use coaches to make them better at teaching. And you don't have coaches who are doing other things, DEI related. So they weren't able to, they didn't pick the correct curriculum, or they didn't provide enough district coaches for literacy or math. So they manipulated the only lever they had left, and that was the cut scores. And so it's gotten so crazy. And I think we've lived through 15 years of so much extremes that people are really ready to have this conversation. And yes, we all care about the achievement gap. I have 3 sons. They're raised in the most homogenous place you could possibly raise them. They have the same mom, same dad, we have the same meals, and yet they're all going to be wildly different. I don't know where education got this idea that they could take all of these wildly different children and have equal outcomes.
Wow. I'm going through your timeline, and I'm just like, I'm really blown away by this. If you see me being quiet, because I'm like looking through, because it moves, because we're talking about race here a lot, where we see Damon Means, Damon Means, if you don't know, was the superintendent of Mequon Thiensville schools once upon a time. Now he is in Wauwatosa, doing a terrible job there too. And he is the chair for Promoting Excellence for All, State Superintendent's Task Force on the Achievement Gap. So they get together to talk about basically expanding equity. At this time, folks like Gloria Ladson-Billings, they go across and they do these equity audits. They provide trainings for teachers. You have Elise Fratura, there's the programs, but all of these equity programs are geared towards one thing: dismantling like whiteness, which means
and they want to bring in culturally responsive materials. They just can't learn because we don't have the right materials, and they can't learn because they have trauma, and then the trauma-informed care gets hijacked into trauma from being trauma from whiteness through the Office of Children's Mental Health. So I can see the effort that has been made. There has been so much money and so much time and so much treasure spent on this, but it is a little bit of grace from God that we have this timeline, because it's long enough and we have the test scores to prove it, that this is a failed thought experiment.
yes,
This is a failed educational experiment. And that's okay. But now it's time to do the hard work and go back to what education should fundamentally be about. And math and reading are the most fundamental gifts we can give our children to make them able to have a better life.
Yeah, that 100%. That we have to teach kids to read. There are success stories. The science of reading, getting back to phonics, abandoning whole language, abandoning a lot of these. Basically, they come up with every few years. There's a whole new way to teach to read, a whole new way to teach math. There's Common Core. In my opinion, I think that this has become a billion-dollar industry. So instead of going back to what we know works, it's let's create something else, scrap everything. Then you have to hire the consultants. This to me is very much a grifter game of how can we get money? How can we spend money? The school districts have to spend the money that they have, or they don't get it the next year. So they are just trying to find ways to spend money. And then you've got this small core cohort that they work together. So they, they've got their own sort of grifter system, where patronage system. They're going to give jobs to their friends, and you see it all the time. They hire the same consulting company that, one guy was the superintendent of a school district, now a consulting company, and a friend, and bring him in, and then he'll do the work. And I've seen it time and time again over the last 6 years. It's very much its own kind of grifter system. And the whole time they're kind of complaining about capitalism, and they pretend like they just hate money, hate capitalism, when I think a lot of their motives are financial.
The financials just don't make sense anymore. My school district receives over $18,000 per son, and yet I'm supplementing 2 of my children with private reading intervention, and at a fraction of the cost of $18,000 a year. So I think we have to look at this as, we need people who have worked in the private sector, who have been turnaround experts, to come in and peel back the lid. Every industry has innovated and been better. So why does DPI have over 600 employees? That to me is the most insane thing I've ever heard. Like 600.
Why would any politician be willing to give them more money, especially Republicans? But they are. They not only do they continue to fund, they give them more money. They've not done well with what they have.
I just don't think anybody's read what they've. This isn't exciting. Nobody wants to read thousands of pages of DPI documents and watch all these videos and clip them. I mean, this is not. This is
I guess we're
stuff, and that's okay. But no one's looked at it, and so now, because I needed the closure, I needed to know how my son became a victim. And I have that closure now. I do not know when the OCR will come back and give a judgment of his verdict in his case. But I know it wasn't just one building. It wasn't one school district. It's not one Title IX case. It's not one school board having to fight. These are all connected. And we can squarely put this back to Tony Evers and Dr. Jill Underly, and we can say, you have failed. And this is a failed policy and a practice. And it's time to take over and to clean it out and get back to very fundamental basics.
Yes. So to use this timeline to look at how we got here in Wisconsin and across the country, you can imagine if you start to look at some dates, go through your board docs, you're going to find very similar, because this is all related to federal funding. So it starts with, now we could go back, there's mistakes made, George Bush, No Child Left Behind. Yeah, there's stuff there, but it really goes into overdrive with the Obama years. So you look over 8 years and you are going to see similar timelines, because the conference at Aspen Institute, I mean, come on, like, it's not even original anymore. It's the same story. You can just take out Tony Evers and put in someone else. Like, Tony Evers is governor, put in JB Pritzker. Like, they're interchangeable. They don't care who is the actual person in charge. It's the systems. It's the system that they are installing. So you will see this same progression from 2008, 2009 forward. And when you see how it's built and go through and read the authors and those promoting it, and then look backwards, and that's where you have James Lindsay, and you have Chris Rufo, and you have so many that are willing to do those deep dives, and you look back into where these philosophies began in the schools of education, you get this understanding, and then you can push past all this and think, okay, we've got to do what works now. And I want to say that while our kids aren't getting the education that they need with this money, teachers aren't getting paid a living wage either. A lot of them, their income is not increasing with inflation. So I'm not trying to say that teachers are living large. They aren't. So who is? Where is this money going? And I think it's going to, more than anything, yeah, we've got administrators get paid some good money, but I think it's the equity consultants. I think it's the outside groups. It's the NGOs. It's the SPLCs. It's the Advocates for Youth. It's the SECUS. It's all of these groups that are formed, like the ESSER fund monies. We didn't even get into that, but then another big wave, another big change that you see, inflection point, is 2020 and ESSER funds and COVID. Huge injections of cash. And this is all now going to mental health. It's funding radical mental health community schools. Right now it's Mental Health Month in May. And so in closing, because I know we both have to get our kids, what do you have to say about what's new on the horizon? And if you don't know, now you know. It's mental health in schools. It's using our schools as mental health clinics and embedding SEL, social emotional learning, into every possible subject that your kids will do in school.
Social emotional learning and all of the mental health are just another way to recycle their funds. We've seen time and time and time again with DPI, and school districts have figured out how to outsource to consultants. And
Yep.
there's a really popular story that came out about DPI having their Wisconsin Dells convention, where they changed all of the district measurements, and they're like, nope, we can't tell you anything about it because we hired a third party. And I think school districts are doing this too. So that's
Yep.
how they're hiding it. They're giving them tons of money. And the public is really the one who we get left out in the dark.
Yep. And so, and I know our time is up. I hope you can come back on very soon, because I want to go through the rest of the timeline, because the next step is where we start to deal with queer theory and what we're dealing with a lot now with the whole LGBTQIA2S Spirit Plus movement. And this timeline shows right when it starts. And so I want to pick up from there next time, because we're going to, like, where does this start? And I think people are going to be surprised to learn that as early as 2012, these activists are talking about bathroom policy. I will tell you, in 2012, my kids are all pretty young. You would have blown me away. I would have thought you were crazy if future me came and said, Scarlett, your number one issue you're going to be dealing with in 2026 is getting biological boys out of girls' locker rooms and shower rooms in public schools. I would say you're nuts. You're absolutely nuts. That can't be happening. No one, even the most radical Democrat, would tell you that's not happening. It will never happen. And yet that was already on their mind in 2012, which is pretty shocking to me to know that that's how long they had been planning this sort of progression. So thanks for coming on, Colbey.
Thank you.
I'm so glad to hear that things are going better with your son, and I look forward to picking up where we left off on this timeline.